When Mia marries Ethan, a charming and ambitious entrepreneur, her family believes she's found her happily ever after. But her siblings senses something darker lurking beneath Ethan's polished facade. As mounting evidence reveals Ethan's financial manipulations and sinister motives, a secret plan unfolds to expose his lies. The shocking truth spirals into an elaborate takedown that destroys Ethan's reputation, but the victory is short-lived. With the FBI uncovering deeper layers of his crimes and Ethan vanishing into the shadows, a chilling final message from him leaves everyone wondering, how far will Ethan go for revenge? A gripping tale of betrayal, justice, and the dangerous consequences of exposing the truth. The first time I met Ethan, I knew something was off. He had that slick charm that made people instantly like him, polished, smooth, almost too perfect. My sister, Mia, was glowing when she introduced him to the family. She had that look in her eyes, the one that screamed, "I've finally found the one." I wanted to be happy for her, I really did, but something in my gut told me to tread carefully. It wasn't anything specific at first. Ethan's smile was warm, his handshake firm. He laughed at all the right times and complimented my mom's cooking like he'd been rehearsing it in front of a mirror. But there was a hollowness behind his eyes, like he was performing rather than living. I brushed it off as nerves. After all, meeting your girlfriend's family for the first time can be overwhelming. But the more I got to know Ethan, the more uneasy I felt. He had a way of steering every conversation back to himself. If someone mentioned a new job or a recent achievement, Ethan would jump in with an exaggerated story about his own success. He was developing a revolutionary app, meeting with investors, or on the verge of a big breakthrough. It all sounded impressive, but whenever I asked him for specifics, his answers were vague. He'd say things like, "It's all under NDA right now," or, "You wouldn't believe how competitive this industry is." Mia, on the other hand, was smitten. She believed every word Ethan said, defending him whenever I questioned his stories. "He's just private about his work," she told me one night after dinner. "You'll see, when everything takes off, we'll be set for life." I wanted to trust her judgment. Mia wasn't the type to fall for just anyone. She'd been burned in the past by men who didn't appreciate her, men who saw her kindness as a weakness. I thought maybe Ethan was different, someone who could finally give her the happiness she deserved. So, I bit my tongue and tried to push my doubts aside. For a while, things seemed fine. Ethan and Mia got engaged, and the wedding was a beautiful affair. She looked radiant in her dress, and Ethan, with his practiced charm, played the part of the perfect groom. I smiled through it all, but deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It was like watching a perfect movie set, you admire the craftsmanship, but you know it's just a facade. The cracks started to show a few months into their marriage. Mia began calling me more often, venting about Ethan's long work hours and his constant business trips. He was always on the move, meeting clients or attending tech conferences in different cities. She didn't seem suspicious, just lonely. "He's doing it for us," she said during one of our phone calls. "He wants to build a future for our family." But it wasn't just the trips. Mia mentioned that their finances were tighter than she'd expected. Ethan had asked her to take on more household expenses so he could reinvest his earnings into his startup. She was covering the mortgage, utilities, groceries, and even some of his credit card bills. "It's temporary," she assured me. "Once the app launches, we'll be fine." I didn't believe a word of it. Ethan's promises were starting to sound like fairy tales, too good to be true. I decided to do a little digging on my own. I didn't want to hurt Mia, but I couldn't sit back and watch her pour her hard-earned money into a black hole. My first step was to research Ethan's so-called startup. He claimed to be working on an app that would revolutionize the way people managed their finances, but when I searched online, there was no trace of his company. No website, no press releases, no LinkedIn page, nothing. It was as if his business didn't exist. I confronted Mia about it one evening, trying to tread carefully. Have you ever seen any of Ethan's work? I asked her. Like a prototype or a business plan? She hesitated for a moment before replying. He's shown me some sketches and mock-ups, she said. But he's really protective of his ideas. He doesn't want anyone to steal them. Don't you think that's a little convenient? I pressed. If he's asking you to support him financially, don't you have a right to know what you're investing in? Mia's face tightened, and I knew I'd hit a nerve. He's my husband, she said firmly. I trust him. That was the end of the conversation. Mia shut me out, and I felt like I'd overstepped. But I couldn't let it go. Something didn't add up, and I needed answers. The breakthrough came a few weeks later. I was helping Mia with her taxes when I stumbled across a bank statement she'd accidentally left on the counter. It wasn't snooping, at least, that's what I told myself. But when I glanced at the statement, I noticed a series of large withdrawals labeled as transfers to a private account under Ethan's name. Do you know what this is about? I asked Mia, holding up the statement. She glanced at it briefly before shrugging. Oh, those are probably for the business, she said. Ethan handles all of that. But why is it going into a personal account instead of a business account? I asked. Mia waved me off. It's just easier that way, she said. Stop worrying so much. Ethan knows what he's doing. I didn't press her further, but my suspicion was growing. Ethan wasn't just controlling their finances, he was actively hiding things from her. I decided to take matters into my own hands. That night, I stayed up late, digging deeper into Ethan's life. I hacked into Mia's email account, a decision I'm not proud of, but I justified it as protecting her. I found emails between Ethan and someone named Chris, discussing transfers, investments, and ways to keep certain transactions off the books. It was all vague, but one thing was clear: Ethan wasn't building a startup. He was siphoning money for his own gain. I couldn't sleep after that. The man my sister trusted with her life was nothing more than a con artist, and she had no idea. I wanted to march over to their house and confront him right then and there, but I knew it wouldn't work. Ethan would twist the narrative, make me look like the bad guy, and Mia would side with him. I needed a plan, a way to expose Ethan for who he really was without leaving any room for doubt. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, an idea began to form in my mind. If Ethan was so determined to scam my sister, I'd turn the tables on him. I'd beat him at his own game. It started with creating a new identity. If I was going to outplay Ethan, I couldn't do it as myself. He was too paranoid, too guarded. I needed to become someone he couldn't resist trusting, someone who could draw him out of the shadows and into the open. That's how Max Chandler was born. Max was everything Ethan aspired to be: a self-made tech tycoon, a venture capitalist with deep pockets, and a man who thrived on discovering the next big thing. I crafted Max's persona with care. His LinkedIn profile showcased an impressive career trajectory, complete with a fictional tech startup he'd sold for millions. His Instagram account featured a luxurious lifestyle, exotic vacations, high-end cars, and photos with influencers and entrepreneurs I photoshopped in. I even created a professional-looking website for his investment firm, complete with stock photos of a sleek office and testimonials from fake clients. It was all smoke and mirrors, but it was convincing enough to fool anyone who didn't look too closely. And if there was one thing I knew about Ethan, it was that he never looked too closely. The bait came in the form of a simple email. "Hi Ethan," I wrote, using Max's sleek, professional tone. "I came across your profile on a tech forum, and your app idea caught my attention. I think it has a lot of potential, and I'd love to discuss a possible investment. Let me know if you're interested." I didn't have to wait long for a response. Less than 24 hours later, Ethan replied, "Thank you for reaching out. I'm incredibly excited about the work I'm doing, and I'd be thrilled to discuss it further. Let me know when you're available to connect." Hook, line, and sinker. Over the next few days, Max and Ethan exchanged emails, setting up a virtual meeting. I used voice-altering software and scripted every word of our conversation. Ethan was eager, almost desperate, as he pitched his non-existent app to me. He used buzzwords like revolutionary, disruptive, and cutting edge, but when I pressed him for specifics, he stumbled. His ideas were vague at best, a collection of recycled concepts that didn't hold up to scrutiny. But Max didn't call him out on it. Instead, I pretended to be intrigued. "This is exactly the kind of project I'm looking for," I told him. "I think we can do something incredible together. But before I commit, I need to see a bit more from you, a detailed business plan, projected financials, and proof of concept. Can you provide that?" Ethan hesitated for a moment, then quickly recovered. "Of course," he said. "I'll get everything to you by the end of the week." I knew he wouldn't. He didn't have anything to show because the app didn't exist. But I wasn't interested in the app, I was interested in pushing Ethan deeper into my trap. Sure enough, a week went by, and Ethan's business plan was a joke. He sent over a hastily thrown-together PowerPoint filled with generic statistics, fake projections, and screenshots he'd probably stolen from someone else's work. It was so sloppy that I almost laughed out loud, but Max had to stay professional. "This looks promising," I replied, keeping up the act. "But before we move forward, I'd like to make sure you're as invested in this as I am. I typically ask for a show of commitment from my partners, 10% of the total investment amount. I'm looking to put $200,000 into your project, so if you can match $20,000, we'll seal the deal and get started." There was a long pause on the video call before Ethan spoke. $20,000, he repeated, his smile faltering for the first time. That's a bit steep. I'll need some time to gather the funds." I could see the wheels turning in his head. He didn't have the money, and he couldn't pull it from his private account without raising questions from Mia. But I knew exactly what he'd do. He'd go to Mia, spinning some sob story about needing her support for this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. He'd manipulate her, just like he always did. And that was exactly what I was counting on. Over the next few days, I kept a close eye on Mia. She didn't know I was watching, of course, but I could tell something was bothering her. She was quieter than usual, distracted, and when I called her, she seemed hesitant to talk. Finally, after about a week, she admitted what was going on. "Ethan has this amazing opportunity," she said, her voice tinged with both excitement and nervousness. "He's found an investor for his app, but they're asking him to contribute some of his own money. He says it's standard practice in the tech world. And he's asking you for the money," I guessed, already knowing the answer. Mia hesitated. "Well, not asking, exactly. He needs a little help, that's all. It's not a big deal. Once the app takes off, we'll be more than fine." I bit back the urge to tell her the truth. I wanted to scream, "He's lying to you. He's using you." But I knew it wouldn't work. Ethan had her wrapped around his finger, and if I came at him too hard, she'd only defend him. So instead, I said, "Just be careful, Mia. Make sure you're not giving away more than you can afford to lose." She nodded, but I could tell my words didn't sink in. She was too blinded by love, and by Ethan's carefully constructed lies. Sure enough, a few days later, I saw the transfer in her bank account. Mia had wired $20,000 to Ethan, believing she was helping him achieve his dreams. She had no idea that money would never go toward an app. But it wouldn't go to Ethan, either. I'd already hacked into Ethan's private account, the one he used to stash Mia's money. When the $20,000 hit his account, I intercepted it and immediately wired it back to Mia's savings. Ethan didn't notice, not yet, anyway. He was too busy celebrating his supposed investment with Max. Meanwhile, I prepared the next phase of my plan. It wasn't enough to take back the money, Ethan needed to face real consequences. And that meant destroying the one thing he valued most, his reputation. Ethan was riding high, completely oblivious to what I'd done. He thought he'd just secured $20,000 from Mia and another $200,000 from Max Chandler. He was already talking about expanding his non-existent team and lining up developers for his fake app. The man had no shame. But Ethan's overconfidence was about to be his downfall. I had all the pieces I needed to take him down: the emails he exchanged with Max, the fake business plan he'd submitted, and proof of the financial transfers he'd orchestrated behind Mia's back. But simply confronting Ethan wasn't enough. I wanted to expose him on a grand scale, to make sure he couldn't worm his way out of it. Step 1 was planting the seeds of doubt. Ethan was a narcissist, and like all narcissists, he thrived on his image. I needed to target that carefully constructed facade of his. So, I went back to Max's fake Instagram account and posted a cryptic update, excited to partner with an up-and-coming entrepreneur on a groundbreaking project. Big things are coming. Within hours, Ethan had commented on the post, "Honored to be working with you, Max. Let's change the world." That comment was all the proof I needed. I took a screenshot of it and paired it with the fake business plan Ethan had sent me. Then, using a burner email account, I sent everything to a popular tech blog that specialized in uncovering scams and shady business practices in the industry. My email was short and to the point. "You should look into Ethan Carter. He's been pitching a fake app to investors and using it to steal money." Attached is his business plan and a screenshot of him trying to legitimize his scam by name-dropping a fake investor. A quick background check will reveal that neither the app nor the investor exists. Thought you'd want to know. It didn't take long for the story to explode. Within 48 hours, the blog published an article titled "Aspiring Entrepreneur Exposed: Ethan Carter's Fake App and Fraudulent Investment Scheme." They tore him apart, detailing how he had no registered business, no intellectual property, and no evidence to back up his claims. They even pointed out discrepancies in his personal finances, noting the suspicious transfers to and from his accounts. I watched the fallout unfold in real time. Ethan's social media accounts were flooded with angry comments from people who'd read the article. Scammer, they called him. Fraud. This guy's a joke. His carefully curated image was crumbling before his eyes. But that wasn't the best part. The blog article gained so much traction that other people Ethan had scammed in the past started coming forward. One by one, former investors and business partners shared their stories, painting a picture of a serial con artist who had been running this game for years. The pressure on Ethan was mounting, and I could see the cracks forming. He started deleting his social media accounts one by one, but it was too late. Screenshots of his comments and posts were already circulating online. Mia was the last to find out. She called me a few days after the article went viral, her voice shaking. "Have you seen this?" she asked, her words coming fast and frantic. "The article about Ethan?" I played dumb. "What article?" She hesitated, as if saying it out loud would make it more real. "They're saying Ethan's been lying, about the app, about the investors. People are calling him a scammer." "Mia," I said gently. "Are you okay?" "I don't know," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I don't know what to believe. Ethan says it's all lies, that someone's trying to sabotage him." But, she trailed off, and I could hear her crying softly on the other end of the line. I wanted to tell her everything right then and there, to explain how I'd set the whole thing in motion. But I knew it wasn't the right time. Mia needed to come to terms with the truth on her own. "What does your gut tell you?" I asked instead. There was a long silence before she finally said, "It doesn't feel right. None of it feels right anymore." That was all I needed to hear. Meanwhile, Ethan was in full-blown damage control mode. He tried to claim the article was a smear campaign, cooked up by jealous competitors who wanted to destroy his company. But nobody was buying it. The tech blog released follow-up pieces, exposing more of his lies and featuring interviews with people he'd conned. Ethan's name was mud, and his reputation was shattered. But I wasn't done yet. While Ethan scrambled to salvage what little dignity he had left, I focused on making sure Mia was safe. I knew Ethan would try to manipulate her into sticking by his side, playing the victim and twisting the narrative. I couldn't let that happen. I met with Mia in person, sitting across from her at the kitchen table in her cozy home, the home she'd worked so hard to build, the one Ethan had nearly destroyed. "Mia," I said carefully, "I know this is hard, but you need to protect yourself. Ethan's lies go deeper than you realize. He's been using you, taking your money to fund his scams." Her eyes widened, and she shook her head. "No, he said that money was for the app." "There is no app," I said bluntly. "I've looked into it. There's no company, no prototype, no investors, nothing. It's all a lie." Tears streamed down her face as the weight of my words sank in. "Why would he do this to me?" she whispered. "I've done everything for him. I've supported him, believed in him." "Because people like Ethan don't care about anyone but themselves," I said softly. "You deserve better than this, Mia. You deserve someone who values you for who you are, not for what they can take from you." It wasn't easy for her to hear, but I could see the realization dawning in her eyes. She'd been betrayed by the person she trusted most, and it was a wound that would take time to heal. As for Ethan, his troubles were just beginning. With his reputation in shambles, his access to Mia's money cut off, and the public backlash growing stronger every day, he had nowhere left to turn. He packed his bags and left town, disappearing as quickly as he'd arrived in our lives. But for me, it wasn't enough to see him run. I needed to make sure he'd never do this to anyone else again. And that meant delivering the final blow. With Ethan gone, it seemed like everything was finally over. Mia had filed for divorce and was slowly rebuilding her life. The house felt lighter without his toxic presence, and for the first time in years, I saw her smile, genuinely smile. I thought we were in the clear. But life has a funny way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. It started with an envelope. It was addressed to Mia, and it arrived one chilly morning, slipped under her door rather than delivered by mail. She found it while walking to the kitchen and called me over immediately. "Did you see anyone outside?" she asked, her voice uneasy. I shook my head. "No, I just got here." The envelope had no return address, and when she opened it, her hands trembling, we found a single sheet of paper inside. It was a printed email thread, between Ethan and someone named Chris. The messages were cryptic but damning. They referenced large sums of money being moved around, phrases like, "keeping it off the books," and a chilling line from Ethan, "As long as Mia keeps paying the bills, we're good. She'll never know." Mia's face went pale as she read the words. What is this?" she stammered, looking at me as if I had the answers. "I don't know," I lied, my heart racing. I recognized the emails immediately. They were the same ones I'd found weeks ago when I'd hacked Ethan's accounts. But I hadn't printed them. I hadn't sent them. Someone else had. I didn't have time to process it because, moments later, there was a knock at the door. Mia flinched, her eyes darting to me for reassurance. I moved cautiously to the peephole and saw two men in dark suits standing on the porch. They weren't police, but they had an official air about them. I opened the door just enough to speak. "Can I help you?" One of the men pulled out a badge. "FBI. We need to speak with Mia Carter." The next hour was a blur. The agents explained that they were investigating Ethan for wire fraud, tax evasion, and money laundering. Apparently, the article exposing Ethan had tipped off several former associates, who came forward with additional information. Ethan wasn't just a scammer, he was part of a much larger operation involving offshore accounts and fake investments. Mia was stunned. "I didn't know anything about this," she said, her voice shaking. "He told me he was working on an app. I gave him money because I thought I was helping him." The agents seemed sympathetic but stern. "We believe you," one of them said. "But unfortunately, because the accounts he used were in both your names, we need to conduct a full audit. We'll need access to all your financial records, including any joint accounts you shared with Ethan." That's when it hit me, Mia's money wasn't just drained by Ethan, it was tied up in his crimes. If the FBI found evidence linking her to his schemes, even unknowingly, she could lose everything. As soon as the agents left, Mia collapsed onto the couch, sobbing. "What am I going to do?" she cried. "I can't afford a lawyer, and if they think I was involved." "You weren't involved," I said firmly. "You trusted him, and he used that against you. They'll see that." But even as I said it, doubt crept in. Ethan was good at covering his tracks, and if he'd forged her signature or used her accounts for illegal transfers, it could look like she was complicit. I felt a pang of guilt, knowing how deep I'd already meddled in this situation. Then, like clockwork, my phone buzzed. It was an anonymous message: "Check Ethan's private files. There's more than you think." I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting. Who was sending me this? And how did they know what I'd been up to? Against my better judgment, I followed the lead. I logged back into Ethan's email account, the one I'd hacked before, and started digging. Most of the old messages were gone, deleted in a frenzy after the article went viral. But in the drafts folder, I found something that made my blood run cold. A scanned document titled "Prenup Agreement," and signed. I clicked it open, and there it was, a prenuptial agreement Ethan had drafted before his marriage to Mia but never filed. The agreement essentially stated that Mia's assets would remain hers in the event of a divorce, but any debt incurred during the marriage would be split equally. That part wasn't surprising. What was surprising was the second clause. In the event of financial insolvency, all joint liabilities will default to the spouse listed as the primary account holder. It hit me like a freight train. Ethan had set her up from the beginning. He hadn't just married her for her money, he'd tied all of his debts to her, ensuring she'd be left holding the bag when everything fell apart. This wasn't just manipulation. It was premeditated financial abuse. I printed the document immediately and brought it to Mia. She stared at it, her hands trembling. "He never even mentioned a prenup," she said, her voice hollow. "Because he didn't need to file it," I explained. "He got what he wanted, a way to dump all his financial mess onto you." She broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. I sat beside her, trying to comfort her, but my mind was racing. If Ethan had gone this far to protect himself, what else was he hiding? And then it hit me, the offshore accounts. Using the same burner email I'd used to contact the tech blog, I reached out to the FBI. I gave them everything, the prenup, the emails, and the details of Ethan's secret accounts. I told them I was an anonymous whistleblower who'd been tracking Ethan's schemes for years. It was risky. I knew if they traced the email back to me, I could be in serious trouble. But I couldn't let Mia suffer for Ethan's crimes. A week later, the agents returned with good news. They'd found the offshore accounts and confirmed that Ethan had funneled millions through them, none of which had Mia's name attached. In fact, the evidence I'd provided helped clear her entirely. But the scandal wasn't over yet. 3 days after the FBI visit, Mia got another envelope in the mail. This time, it wasn't from the authorities. It was from Ethan. Inside was a single note. "You think you've won, but this isn't over. You'll see. E." Mia's hands shook as she read it, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Ethan had vanished after the article broke, but he wasn't gone. He was out there, watching, waiting. And if I'd learned anything about him, it was that he never played fair.